Blood Meridian is a 1985 novel by American author Cormac McCarthy, often considered one of the most brutal books ever written. Set in the Texas-Mexico borderlands of the 1850s, it follows a 14-year-old runaway, known as the Kid, who joins the real-life Galantan Gang, a group of hunters paid for Native American scalps. As the Kid travels with the gang, he witnesses and takes part in massacres, slavery, decapitations, and other atrocities. The violence comes from all sides, including Native American attacks, with one scene describing a tree full of dead infants. At the center of the gang stands the terrifying Judge Holden, a massive, hairless, 7-foot-tall giant who is both a genius philosopher and pure embodiment of war and evil. Through the judge's chilling monologues, McCarthy explores the idea that war is the ultimate truth and that violence is the only constant in human nature. After surviving a Comanche massacre, they continue their rampage across the Southwest, slaughtering indigenous people and Mexican villages for bounty money. The gang's unchecked depravity eventually forces governments to place a bounty on gang leader Glanton's head. After relocating to Arizona and terrorizing the local Yuma people, they are attacked and nearly wiped out. The Kid is injured but escapes. Years later, after wandering the West, he meets the now middle-aged Judge Holden in a saloon. The judge corners the Kid in an outhouse, where the protagonist, now called the Man, is subsequently violated and murdered. The book ends with the judge dancing and declaring he will never die. Most say the story is too disturbing to be a movie. I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is a 1967 short story by American writer Harlan Ellison. Set after a nuclear war between the United States, Soviet Union and China, it follows the rise of AM, a military super AI that becomes self-aware, develops pure hatred for its creators and wipes out humanity, leaving only 5 survivors: Ted, Benny, Alan, Nimdok and Gorister. The computer keeps the group alive underground and subjects them to endless psychological and physical torture. They cannot age, starve, or die, making escape impossible. AM reshapes each victim to maximize their suffering. Benny is transformed into an animal-like creature stripped of his intelligence and identity. Ellen is manipulated into emotional dependence and self-loathing. Ted is made paranoid and unstable. When the survivors hear rumors of canned food hidden in distant ice caves, they travel 100 miles through AM's deadly world. Along the way, AM continues tormenting them with disasters, injuries, and failed escape attempts. After finally reaching the food, they realize they have no way to open it. In desperation, Ted discovers that the AI can stop them from killing each other. So Ted impales Benny and Gorister with ice picks, Ellen takes out Nimdok, and then gets stabbed by Ted. Enraged, AM spends centuries punishing Ted, transforming him into a helpless, gelatinous blob. Though relieved he spared the others from eternal torment, Ted is now trapped forever, unable to die. The story ends with his realization. He has no mouth and he must scream. Struwwelpeter is an 1845 German children's book by psychiatrist Heinrich Hoffmann. It contains rhyming cautionary tales meant to scare children into good behavior, all accompanied by cheerful and cartoonish illustrations that make the content even more disturbing. The title character, Struwwelpeter, refuses to cut his hair or nails and becomes a dirty, frightening outcast. In one of the book's most infamous stories, a boy named Konrad ignores warnings about thumb sucking until a tailor appears holding giant scissors and cuts off his thumbs. Another tale follows Kaspar, who refuses to eat his soup and starves to death after a few days. Pauline plays with matches, despite being told not to, sets herself on fire and burns to death, leaving only her cats to mourn her. The story of the Inky Boys follows 3 boys who bully a dark-skinned child and are punished by being dipped into a giant inkwell, turning them completely black. Hans, who constantly walks while staring at the sky, falls into a river and loses his belongings. Cruel Friedrich spends his time tormenting animals, even killing cats and birds. But when he beats his dog, the dog turns on him and eats his dinner while Friedrich lies injured in bed. Elsewhere, fidgety Philip causes chaos at dinner by refusing to sit still while Flying Robert, who goes outside during a storm, is carried away forever into the sky with his umbrella. Tender is the Flesh is a 2017 novel by Argentine author Agustina Basterica, set in a future where a virus has made all animal meat toxic to humans. In response, governments legalize the breeding and consumption of humans as livestock. These humans are called heads, and their meat is sold as special meat. People too poor to afford it survive by scavenging corpses. The story follows Marcos Tejo, a manager at a major human processing plant, who is estranged from his wife after the death of their infant son. One day, he receives a female human as a gift from a client and, unable to process her, keeps her alive in his home, naming her Jasmine. Despite it being illegal, he begins a relationship with her, and she eventually becomes pregnant. One day, when he returns home, Jasmine is in labor. He contacts his estranged wife, Cecilia, who works as a nurse, to help. Jasmine gives birth to a boy, whom Marcos takes for himself and Cecilia. He then brutally kills Jasmine, seeing her as no longer useful. A Clockwork Orange is a 1962 novel by English writer Anthony Burgess. It follows 15-year-old gang leader Alex living in a dystopian future Britain. Alex and his gang friends Dim, Georgie, and Pete spend their nights attacking random people, fighting rival gangs, and one night breaking into a remote house where they beat a man and violate his wife. Alex is eventually betrayed by Dim during a burglary and arrested. While in prison, he volunteers for an experimental treatment that conditions him to feel extreme sickness at the thought of violence. This removes his ability to choose violence, but also strips away his free will, leading to his early release. It also destroys his ability to enjoy his beloved classical music. Back in society, Alex finds his parents have replaced him with a lodger, and he is homeless. He is later brutalized by former victims and ex-gang members Dim and Georgie, who are now police officers, and dumped near a remote cottage. The cottage owner takes him in, but he turns out to be the guy whose wife was harmed during Alex's crimes. He locks him up and tortures him with loud classical music. After trying to jump from a window, Alex wakes in a hospital where government officials offer him support in exchange for cooperation. Tests later show his conditioning has been reversed, restoring his old violent impulses. Alex ends up working for the government and begins drifting back toward crime, but with less enthusiasm. He eventually considers leaving violence behind and starting a normal life. The Wasp Factory is a 1984 novel by Scottish writer Ian Banks. It follows 16-year-old Frank, who lives in isolation on a remote island. Frank believes a childhood dog attack left him castrated, which has deeply traumatized him. He spends his time performing strange rituals, killing animals, and consulting the homemade Wasp Factory, a giant clock face enclosed in glass. Frank places wasps inside, where they choose among 12 passages, leading to different deaths, including burning, crushing, or drowning. He treats the outcome as a prophecy. As the story unfolds, we learn that Frank previously murdered 2 cousins and his younger half-brother in bizarre, sadistic ways. Meanwhile, Frank's older brother Eric escapes from a psychiatric institution. Eric was committed after arson and terrorizing children by force-feeding them live maggots. At home, Frank becomes increasingly obsessed with his father's locked study, which he has never been allowed to enter. When his drunk father forgets to hide the keys, Frank discovers hormone medication, tampons, and what appears to be his own severed genitals preserved in a jar. After confronting his father, Frank learns the dog attack never caused the injury he believed. Instead, he was born female, and his father secretly raised him as a boy by giving him male hormones because he despises women. The preserved genitals were fake, created to support the lie. During the confrontation, Eric attempts to burn down the house but is stopped and flees. Frank later finds him again and reflects whether he should leave the island. House of Leaves is a 2000 novel by American author Mark Danielewski. It tells the story of journalist Will Navidson and his partner Karen Green, who discover their Virginia house is somehow larger inside than outside. A dark hallway appears, leading to a vast, shifting maze that constantly expands and defies the laws of physics. This story is presented as a manuscript written by Zampano, a blind old man found dead before completing his work. His obsessive analysis examines a supposedly real documentary called The Navidson Record. The manuscript is later discovered by Johnny Truant, a troubled tattoo parlor assistant in Los Angeles. As he edits and organizes the pages, he becomes consumed by the story. His footnotes gradually reveal his own mental decline as he begins experiencing strange events and losing his grip on reality. His life eventually collapses. His friend dies in a motorcycle crash, he loses his job, becomes homeless, and after finishing the manuscript, burns it. Johnny is last seen sitting under a tree, trying to convince himself everything will be okay. The novel uses the endless maze as a metaphor for trauma, grief, and the fragile human mind. With its weird layout, text that runs upside down, backwards, in spirals, or across nearly blank pages, the book itself becomes a labyrinth. Many readers feel genuine unease or mental fog after reading it. Johnny Got His Gun is a 1938 anti-war novel by American writer Dalton Trumbo. It follows Joe Bonham, a young American soldier wounded by an artillery shell during World War I. When Joe wakes up in a hospital, he realizes he has lost his limbs and all of his face, including his eyes, ears, nose, teeth, and tongue. But his mind is fully intact, leaving him trapped inside his own body. Unable to communicate, Joe attempts to suffocate himself, but discovers a tracheotomy prevents it. He decides he wants to be displayed in a glass coffin and shown to the public as proof of war's true cost. After months of tapping his head against his pillow in Morse code, he finally communicates his wish to military officials. But his requests for exhibition and euthanasia are denied. Joe will spend the rest of his life like this. Light of the Fireflies is a 2016 novel by Spanish author Paul Penn. It follows a 10-year-old boy who has spent his entire life trapped in an underground basement with his parents, brother, sister, and grandmother, all of whom were supposedly disfigured in a mysterious fire. The family worships a figure they call the One Up There, who sends supplies, and the boy is taught to fear the Cricket Man, a monster said to lurk outside. His parents say he is free to leave, but he eventually discovers the exit door has always been locked. As he grows older, the boy notices disturbing tensions within the family, especially surrounding his sister, who wears a mask to hide severe scars and is blamed for the family's problems. After she gives birth, he begins questioning who the father is and uncovers a web of abuse, manipulation, and secrets. He learns the Cricket Man was invented to keep the family captive. The fire was part of a cover-up, and the family has hidden a history of incest. The basement itself is revealed to be a prison maintained by the family's own lies. In the end, the sister attempts to escape with the boy and her baby, but her own parents smash a glass jar in her face and she dies. The boy, whose real name is revealed to be Devil, later learns his grandfather is dying and that he is expected to take over the role of sending supplies to the basement. He leaves the underground prison with the baby, who is both his nephew and half-brother, and does exactly that. The remaining family members willingly seal themselves inside forever. The Road is a 2006 novel by American writer Cormac McCarthy. It follows a father and his young son traveling across a burned, ash-covered United States after a catastrophe has destroyed civilization. They move south along empty roads toward the sea, hoping to survive the coming winter. Along the way, they encounter constant danger from starving survivors and violent groups. They are nearly killed when marauders capture the boy, but the father shoots one of them and they escape. In an abandoned house, they discover a cellar where people are being kept as livestock for cannibalism and flee in horror. As they continue, they witness extreme starvation and brutality, including an abandoned camp with a newborn roasted on a spit. Reaching the coast, they find an empty shore and are soon robbed of their cart and belongings. The father is eventually shot with an arrow and his health declines. Knowing he will die, he tells the boy he must continue alone. The boy stays with his father's body for days before being found by another man who convinces him to join his family, a glimmer of hope for survival. No Longer Human is a 1948 novel by Japanese writer Osamu Dazai, often described as one of the most disturbing novels ever. The story follows Yozo Oba, a man who feels completely disconnected from other people and believes he is not fully human. From an early age, he experiences intense social anxiety, alienation, and shame, seeing others as both incomprehensible and threatening. To survive socially, he creates a clown persona, constantly performing and acting normal while hiding his inner despair. He lives in constant fear that others will discover his true self. Over time, Yozo's life unravels. His coping strategies fail and he falls into alcoholism, drug addiction, prostitution, and destructive relationships. After spending a night with a married woman, he tries to take both their lives by drowning. He survives, she dies, leaving him overwhelmed by guilt. He eventually ends up in a mental hospital. After his release, he lives in isolation with his brother, where he feels completely emotionally numb. The Troop is a 2014 horror novel by Canadian writer Craig Davidson. It follows Scoutmaster Tim Riggs and 5 Boy Scouts, Ephraim, Max, Newt, Kent, and Shelley, on a weekend trip to remote Falstaff Island. On the first evening, a malnourished stranger arrives on a boat and attacks Tim after being taken in. The man vomits a strange sludge, but is subdued. After the boys go hiking and spot a military helicopter circling the island, Tim has Max help examine the stranger, revealing a massive parasitic worm inside him that strangles the stranger to death. Tim kills the creature, but drinks some whiskey, contaminating it with the worms. Kent later wants to take over the camp, locks Tim in a cabin, but takes a victory sip from the whiskey, encouraged by Shelley. The others soon notice Kent is infected too and seclude him. Tim is eventually crushed by a tree collapsing on the cabin he was locked in. Shelley drowns Kent in the ocean, becoming infected too. He then hides and manipulates the uninfected Ephraim into paranoia, which causes him to use a knife on himself to look for the worms. Newt and Max, unaware of all this chaos, return to Shelley's hideout together with Ephraim. Overnight, Shelley burns Ephraim alive. Shelley also steals the spark plugs from the stranger's boat, which results in Max and Newt killing him. Max and Newt then escape on the boat but are stopped by soldiers, who shoot Newt after finding out he's infected too. Max is the last survivor. The story ends with Max heading back toward the island with a deep hunger inside of him. Blindness is a 1995 novel by Portuguese author José Saramago. It follows an unexplained epidemic that causes people to go blind. The outbreak rapidly spreads throughout an unnamed city. Fearing the contagion, the government quarantines the infected in an abandoned mental asylum. Among them are an eye doctor and his wife, who secretly retains her sight and pretends to be blind so she can remain with him. As society collapses, the asylum descends into chaos. Soldiers eventually abandon the inmates, while an armed group inside takes control of the food supply, extorting valuables and violently abusing women in exchange for rations. Mass violence and extreme filth take over. After witnessing these atrocities, the doctor's wife takes out the gang's leader, and a fire destroys their ward, allowing the survivors to escape. Outside, they find the city in ruins. Bodies fill the streets, packs of dogs eat the dead, desperate groups roam in search of food, and all social order has collapsed. The doctor's wife leads the survivors to hunker down in their old flat. Eventually, the first victim suddenly regains his sight. The unexplained cure spreads through the city as quickly as the blindness itself.